Aliona Istratuk has just returned to Moldova, her birthplace. She's been living in Portugal for 22 years, but coming back home always brings up mixed feelings.
It's hard to put into words what we feel, those of us who live far from home. The world is beautiful, but at home it's the best. It's the most beautiful.
Aliona is one of over 1 million Moldovans living abroad, about 1/3 of the country's citizens and nearly 20% of voters. During the last election, the diaspora overwhelmingly supported pro-European President Maia Sandu.
We who have left Moldova are open to new horizons. We have more freedom in our thoughts and our actions. And we want those who live here to have the same, or at least a similar quality of life to what we have there.
But in Moldova, 51% of the population voted for socialist candidate Alexandru Stoianoglu, also favored by the Kremlin. The topic is divisive, even within families.
Sometimes parents are in opposition with us. My mother visited Portugal, she saw how I lived and she liked it. But when the time came to vote, she said that she wants things to get better. But in her mind, better means what she knew during the Soviet times. For me, this is impossible and unreal.
Without the diaspora's vote, Maia Sandu wouldn't have won a second term. Many see this as problematic, especially supporters of the Socialist Party, known for its ties to Moscow.
We don't agree. Why should voters who've been living abroad for 15 to 20 years decide our fate in Moldova? It's not fair. Only those who live in their country should have the right to vote.
The Socialist Party has called for the results to be annulled, but the Constitutional Court validated the outcome in November.
The candidates had different conditions. It wasn't a free election. Administrative resources and public funds were used. The diaspora's votes was influenced. In Europe, hundreds of voting stations were opened, but in Russia, where we have hundreds of thousands of citizens, only 2 voting stations were set up. We don't recognize the results of this election, nor can we recognize the results in the diaspora.
Meanwhile, Moldovan authorities have uncovered a vast voter buying scheme orchestrated from Russia to oust Maia Sandu. Across the country, pro-Russian propaganda fuels nostalgia for the Soviet past, exacerbated by economic struggles. In rural areas, rising prices, particularly for gas, weighs heavily on residents.
My pension is €70. A cubic metre of gas costs €1.50. For heating, I would need 300 to 400 cubic metres. So how can my pension cover that? Then I have to pay for electricity, food.
This pensioner's family lives in France. His son supports the European Union. But for Victor, Moldova's corruption is too deeply rooted.
With all the money the European Union gave us to build roads, Moldova should be entirely covered in 3 layers of asphalt. But what do the authorities do? They put 10, 100 metres, then they steal.
Over €1 billion have been invested in Moldova's roads. The government assures it paved over 700 kilometers in just 3 years. But over 30 years after independence, Victor still regrets the fall of the Soviet Union.
Here in this village, he's in America. In America, him too. Him in France, in Germany. Everyone left. If we'd stayed in the Soviet Union, we'd be living like aristocrats, like Americans and even better. Here we had factories, but they sold everything.
After declaring independence, Moldova's GDP per capita collapsed, but has been slowly recovering over the past 2 decades. And in Chișinău, more and more Moldovans are looking towards a European future. Tatiana opened this cafe thanks to Aliona's help. She hopes the European integration will bring more investments.
I have 2 children, and I really wish they would stay here at home so we can develop the business. I hope that if Moldova develops, if there are favorable conditions, with well-paid jobs, I think people would return, and that would be so good for us.
Brussels has already sent some financial support for entrepreneurs. The European Commission is also investing 1.8 billion euros to boost the economy and accelerate reforms, particularly in fighting corruption. In a few months, Moldova will hold key parliamentary elections, a new test for the country's European aspirations, including amongst the diaspora.